So I am adding 2 axles to this trailer. These are brand new axles. I picked them up for quite cheap, 550 bucks from a trailer manufacturer whose customer changed the order last minute, and they had these lying around, so they cleared them out at a good price. Problem is they are 6 inches too wide for this trailer frame. So I've got to take 3 inches off each side. And I say each side because this axle has a camber in the middle. I don't know if you can tell. So I can't take it off right in the middle and just make one cut in the middle because you'd lose that camber. So I've got to take 3 inches off each side. This is all straight all the way through here. There's no bend. The bend doesn't start till near the middle. And then on each side, I'll be adding some sleeves. So I am by no means an expert on this. I've watched a few YouTube videos, and I called the axle manufacturer, and they were okay with the way I was doing it. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a straight edge and score a nice line right down the center of this. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the point of this is that once I cut it and I go to rejoin them, I'm gonna have a nice line that I can line up to make sure the axle goes back exactly in the same orientation it was in. So there. Now I've got a nice line that won't go away, won't rub off on me, and I'll be able to put it back exactly the way it was. Now I'm going to make a mark where I want to make the first cut. I'm going to wrap a piece of tape roughly around the center. And this is just so I can see my pencil mark once I make it. Now if you take, I mean, this is not a scientific way obviously, but it's the best way I got for today. You take a piece of construction paper. Oops, I gotta remeasure my mark. Take a piece of construction paper and line up the edges. You will be somewhat square all the way around. And now you have a nice edge to make your mark with your pencil. I've marked both sides. Now I just got to make some cuts. One thing I forgot to mention, these are electric brakes obviously, so there's a wire running through there. Both those are cut. You can see the cable is in there. I think I managed to not nick it, but I just gotta find a way to get it out. All right, so those cuts were good. Pulled out the brake wire, and they're pretty square, pretty straight. I mean, it's a 5-foot post here that's staying up on its own, so it's got to be somewhat square. So the next step now is to figure out my new spring eye center to center and make my cuts. So now I need to cut this middle pipe down to size. What you have to remember to keep in mind though is however you're cutting this. So these discs are roughly 1/16 of an inch, and I'm gonna be making 4 cuts in total. So I'm roughly taking, you know, what's that, 1/4 of an inch of length out of this pipe just with my cuts. So I need to factor that in. Same method as before. Make a rough mark, figure out where your tape needs to go, then mark on your tape and slide this over to your mark and just trace this all the way around. Another tip for these very thin cutoff blades, when you want to make a nice, clean, accurate cut, don't use a brand new blade because they're too big and they're too wobbly. And they kind of just skip around right off the hop. So if you use a smaller one that's used, and you've gone through a little bit, it'll make a much more accurate and steady cut. So now that all the cuts are done, I've got to put a chamfer on all the ends and on the sleeves and on the axle ends of the cuts there. That way the weld has a nice valley to, you know, sit it. Next step is to drill some holes for plug welds. And what that is, I'm sure most of you know. So this is just tacked in there in place, but I'll show you what the point of this is. So the sleeve comes over top of the joint, right? You get it right in the middle. But if you have no plug welds, well, you're welded here, but in the middle, you know, your joint is kind of left unsupported. So these plug welds tie in this sleeve closer towards the joint there. And it's very important to have. Otherwise the sleeve's almost useless. Ready to start putting this back together. I have these two fairly thick, nice and straight pieces of angle iron that I will clamp. You'll see here in a second. Find those score marks I put in there earlier and line them up just like that. Need some better clamps, I know. Set up, ready to go. I've measured it. It's the width that I want. And you can also just double check that everything is straight and square, is measure the front and the back of each leaf spring. Just like so. So make sure you got your sleeves on now before you tack them up, or if you're screwed, obviously you'd have to cut everything off and slip them on. And those angle irons are holding everything nice and square and tight. And I've lined up those score marks on each end, if you remember before, to make sure that camber is sitting the way it's supposed to. So everything did line up. So I will now take both of these axles off and weld them all up properly. To get started here, it was pretty cold for the last few days, and like below zero. So this metal's pretty cold. So just to get a little bit stronger weld, I'm gonna heat it up quickly beforehand. That's it. That's one of the axles completely done anyways. The sleeves are on, the plug welds are in. I think that's probably gonna be pretty strong. I'm happy with that. And there's not much left to show, so I'm gonna end the video here. Thanks for watching.